Hi everybody, it's Russ and My Hammers 11. I hope you're all safe and well. New to the channel, please consider subscribing, hitting that bell notification button so you're made aware of any time I put new content on. We have videos going up daily, but sometimes 2-3 times a day. And every interview, every memory, every player we speak about is personal to that person, and every story is unique. So make sure you hit that bell so you don't miss any of the stories coming up. Loads of great guests, loads of great fans, including today's fan, lifelong Hammer, Brian Williams. Hi Brian, how are you, man?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good.
How
Probably better
is
in a better state than the team, I think, at the moment.
and so it begins, indeed. I know everyone asked the same question, but how's lockdown treating you, Ryan?
Well, not too bad actually. I've been quite busy working from home. I do some work for the National Union of Journalists, which I'm able to do from home. Having retired from journalism itself a couple of years ago, I now make mischief on behalf of other union members who need help, which, as you can imagine, at the moment are quite a few. So I've been keeping surprisingly busy for a man who's supposedly retired.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. But also, from a sort of a journalist, and obviously people are consuming much more news than they did before everything kicked off. And so, I was reading today, sort of newspaper readership and online newspaper readership has gone like through the roof in the last 3 months.
Yep, no, it has. Unfortunately, the advertising that goes with it, that basically pays for it, has gone through the floor. So, like every other industry, it's going to be interesting to see how it recovers from this as and when. But I guess, however much people would like journalists to go away, and often they do, we tend to stick around one way or another.
Yeah, no, I know.
Won't come into your door soon.
Yeah, no, exactly. But you're right. I mean, it's when I'm not doing this, I work for a market research company who are part of a big PR and media organization. So, I'm always keeping an eye on how the press is doing and stuff, because it's our business basically as well. It's a lot of new generation pieces as well. Anyway, people haven't tuned in to talk about that. We're talking about West Ham, and that's the idea of the channel, Brian. Is, as you said, it's not great times at the moment to be a West Ham fan, but has it ever been? Probably in your time it might have been, to be fair. But we sort of get these stories and find out about people's journeys into West Ham, and obviously the players that might have meant something or might not meant something to them. So for you, Brian, why West Ham? Why was it your club?
That's a good question. I'm not an EastEnder myself. I adopted them as a 7-year-old in the run-up to the 1964 Cup final. I actually hailed from West London before moving down to a new town called Bracknell to the west of London. So it wasn't West Ham territory at all. But for some reason, I adopted them before the semi-final against Man U. They supposedly had no chance. And I've been with them ever since through... Well, I was going to say thick and thin, but it's more thin and thin, really.
Yeah. Well, I'm not being funny. When you started, that was probably that's probably the golden era, really, in modern West Ham history, sort of the 60s and 70s and 80s and early sort of mid 80s. And so it's quite funny how the story. Obviously, a lot of people are born into it by geographical location. I interviewed one guy the other day. I think it was Nigel King, who just saw West Ham on Match of the Day, like when his granddad said, "What team do you support?" That one. It could have been any team. It could have been Chelsea. It could have been Man City. It could have, God forbid, it was West Ham. And it's quite funny how those stories happen.
I would say, in defence of my East End credentials, I did marry into an East End family.
Well, there you go.
And today, in fact, is my 32nd wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
So I'm still technically married, at least to EastEnders, and East End, if not one myself.
And it's nice to know you're spending your wedding anniversary, away from your wife, talking about West Ham. So it's probably no different than from the other 31 years, to be honest.
I'll be very careful what I say there.
Exactly. And it's funny, isn't it? It's funny how West Ham sort of gets into the fabric of your clothes. Do you know what I mean? Like things like is it people you meet. Obviously, you sort of meet loads of people, particularly now, not physically but virtually, on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. And the whole sort of West Ham community has seemed to sort of has thrived really in the sort of the lockdown. It does seem that there's lots of messages and support coming from the various groups to each other. It's lovely to see.
Yes, no, it does obviously, as you say, it spreads out, doesn't it? It's like a stone, you drop it in the pond and the ripples spread out and you meet all sorts of fantastic people. And when you're despairing of the club itself and how it's run and various other bits that some of us maybe are not so keen on, the friends you make and the West Ham community is something really special.
No, you're right. We're not here for the football. If you were here
God forbid.
Very, very, very wrong decision if you were. But that, again, I think that's sort of why I think the family and the community, the West Ham sort of groups are sort of, they have this sort of, I don't know, it's this sort of like, it is a bit like the old East End spirit. Do you know what I mean? In terms of, mucking together. We know we're not going to win, but we'll have a good time. And as soon as everyone gets back is better in terms of, being able to see the games live and with each other. I've been invited to several Zoom parties, watch-along Zoom parties, which have been quite interesting, to be honest, because, but it's been great. And this whole channel, because obviously you came from recommendations from others and they came from recommendations. And it's lovely to speak to so many different people who I normally wouldn't have spoken to if we didn't have the pandemic, to be perfectly honest. And it's really sort of been nice to sort of talk about these memories. So do you remember your first game, Brian? Your first?
Oh, yeah, very clearly. Which actually wasn't at Upton Park. It was at Stamford Bridge, again, with the West London connection. I've been pestering various family members who were generally not interested in football to take me. And in the end, I got put on a coach to a works outing for a Chelsea v West Ham game at Stamford Bridge, which happily we won 3-1. I can remember it as if it were yesterday.
Really?
And, it was, if I hadn't been addicted already, I certainly was after that.
Yeah.
And I like to think I still would have been, even if we'd lost 3-1. But
well, I mean, if you lost 3-1, it would have set you in good stead for the rest of your
it would have.
career.
Yes, well, that was the trouble, really. It kind of gave me a false hope for the following 50-odd years.
Yeah, well, I mean, 60. Obviously, the success of '64, and then the Cup winners and the World Cup, and it was like you must have thinking, this is it, this is easy, this is great, and then sort of probably from the mid '80s onwards, it went a little bit in decline.
Yeah, well, after '86, things did go downhill a bit, but
yeah. Don't forget.
That said, I mean, obviously those early years were fantastic, but West Ham did manage to get themselves relegated with a couple of sides that you thought they're too good to go down, and of course we've actually done that 5 times in my life. And what I've done with my 11 is to go through those teams and those squads and pick out from those squads a team that really I think is too good to go down.
Yeah. Love the segue, Brian. Love the segue. That was brilliant. I didn't need to do it. And that's what we're doing. So obviously we're talking for Brian. He's put his great idea, his new, very unique theme together. So I'm really looking forward to it. So go on then, let's go for these too good to go down, Brian 11s. Who is in goal? Who's between the sticks for this team?
Well, what I did was I went through, as I say, the various squads and divided them into basically three categories. There was no chance. There was I've seen worse and in with a shout. Now, for the keepers I've seen in, again, these are relegation sides, remember. Alan McKnight was an absolute stonewall.
Yeah.
Worst goalkeeper I've ever seen. Now, I owe Alan McKnight a huge apology. I've given him dog's abuse for years as being the worst West Ham goalkeeper. I said confidently we would never see anyone worse in goal than Alan McKnight. And like so many other things in life, I've been proved horribly wrong with Mr. Roberto, who, quite honestly, if he can play in goal for West Ham, so can I. I mean, really. So, Alan, if you're watching this, apologies, my friend. I take it all back. My I've seen worse keepers in all of this. Bobby Ferguson, Mervyn Day and Calamity James, all of whom played in relegation squads. And the 3 who are in with a shout for the actual position are Ludo, of course, Rob Green, who was a fantastic goalkeeper, and Phil Parkes. And it's no secret, probably anybody who knows me, is that Phil Parkes gets the gig. I mean, he was an absolutely fantastic goalkeeper. Anybody who's ever met him will tell you what a nice guy he is. Exactly. But what I would just like to put out a quick shout to Mrs. Parkes, Lavinia, who is an absolutely lovely lady. And if you ever want to see the truth of that thing behind every great man lies a great woman, have a chat with Lavinia. I mean, the story she's got about Phil's early career, the things they had to put up with, what it's like with a young family when your old man is a professional footballer. Christmas, for example, he's off to play an away game, maybe on Boxing Day. I had the pleasure of meeting her and having a long chat with her a couple of years ago, and it's fascinating. She's a lovely lady. So, Lavinia, every West Ham fan owes you a debt of gratitude.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, totally. And the whole Parks family are lovely. But we're getting Marie on soon as well, so that'd be good fun. All right, we'll put Mr. Parks in. This is brilliant. I'm loving this already, bro. You've only just put one position in. Let's go left back if that's okay with you.
Left back, certainly. Well, my no chances there. Mitchell Thomas, Rufus Brevitt, Wayne Bridge, not big fans. I mean, I've never played professional football. Perhaps I shouldn't really call them out, but my God, they weren't the best. Now, Nigel Winterburn, when he did come to us, of course, he'd had a fantastic career, had been a great player in his day. He's in my I've seen worse category. But the in with a shout came down to three, came down to Julian Dix, Frank Lampard and George Paris, who partly because George is a fellow columnist on Blowing Bubbles magazine, which we both write for, and I feel it's only right I get a plug in for. He's also an absolute top fellow. He's George, a really nice guy. Now, I really struggled with this, and in the end, I thought on the grounds that every team needs a full-on psychopath, I've gone for Julian Dix.
Yeah.
He was... well, what can you say about Julian Dix? I mean, apart from being obviously a fantastic penalty taker, a far better player than he was ever given credit for.
Definitely.
He did occasionally have the odd rush of blood to the head, it's fair to say. Some of the challenges he put in, I mean, you could feel the chicken run shake while, he was standing in there. I've seen grown men look away, and wince in horror as some of those challenges went in. And you just knew on a wet Tuesday night, when other people weren't so interested, Dixie would be there.
Yeah.
I mean, Frank Lampard was a brilliant player, and it was a real tough shout between the two of them. But I decided in the end, Dixie got the shout.
No, good shout. No, I agree, and I totally second everything you say there in terms of I think outside of West Ham, he wasn't regarded as a good footballer. But inside, all the West Ham fans knew how much of a fantastic player he was. And Travesty.
Well, it was interesting, wasn't it? When he went, Liverpool came in for him, and he went to Liverpool for that spell. A pretty well-known fact I know, but of course, the last player to score a goal in front of the Kop before, while it was still standing. Yeah. And he played well for Liverpool. And I mean, at the time, there was a story that there were a group of 40 or 50 real diehard Julian Dix fans who went up to watch him play for Liverpool rather than go and watch West Ham. But how true that is, I don't know. But he is one of those characters who you could believe the happening of. I mean,
totally.
He was, charismatic, fantastic player. And, you just knew his heart was in the club.
Yeah, totally. No, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I can so imagine people, following Julian Dix rather than the club, just because.
Well, yes, yeah.
they're probably at West Brom at the moment, sitting outside the Hawthorns. Right, put Julian in. Let's go the other side. Let's go the right back position then, Brian.
Okay, right back. Well, my no chance player there is Repka. Now, I know that there are a lot of people who like Tommy Gunn, but I mean, he was a headbanger of the first ball, and of course still is. I mean,
even more so, yeah.
Yeah, it's probably best not for legal reasons to go into his post-football career and where he is now, which I believe is in a Czechoslovakian jail somewhere.
I believe so.
But he's on the he's on the no chance list. Now, my seen worse, John McDowell, Tim Breaker, Kenny Brown, liked all of those, liked them a lot, real sort of loyal club players. The final three I got down to, all club legends, Billy Bonds, Steve Potts, Ray Stewart. Now, a lot of people may say, Billy Bonds are right back. Well, because that's where he started out for us. And that was where he was playing in that first game at Chelsea that I mentioned earlier. He was right back that day. So that was his first season at the club. So me and Billy go back. His contribution to the club is somewhat greater than mine, I hasten to add. Steve Potts, of course, what can you say about Steve Potts? A true true club legend. Fantastic player, played all along that back four, never let West Ham down.
No.
Got the screaming goal against Hull, of course, that those of us who were there will never forget. Look it up on YouTube, by the way, if you've not seen it, anybody. Yeah. But I actually, in the end, went for Ray Stewart. Partly because, again, he was a terrific player, but his ability to take a penalty was second to none. And I'd sort of had a real dilemma about West Ham penalties ever since the terrible, terrible night. Then Gordon Banks saved the penalty from Jeff Hurst in the League Cup semi-final. And I was on the North Bank right behind that. And I was never quite the same again. I mean, Jeff Hurst, in my book, never missed a penalty. It was in the back of the net and we were off to Wembley. And, of course, Gordon Banks had other ideas. And it shattered my faith in human nature, to be honest. Certainly in West Ham penalty takers. And then along came Tonga, and all was well again. You know, he knew he put the ball on the spot. You just knew where it was going. He was fantastic. And of course, the penalty he took in the the quarter-final against Villa, wasn't it?
Yes,
Absolute last knockings. If we hadn't beaten Villa, it was 0-0 at the time. They were a really good side, and I think if we'd gone to Villa Park, we wouldn't have won at their place. He put the ball down, bang, that was it. And semi-final and the cup.
And the rest was history, exactly. And it's I mean, obviously, and he still gets me interviewed quite a lot on the pitch, don't we, at the London Stadium, and he's always a lovely guy as well. Like, really, I mean, I've had a pleasure. I mean, obviously, by doing this channel, I've obviously been lucky enough to get a lot of players' phone numbers, and so I've been texting them, and to Ray's credit, he phoned me up and he said, well, obviously I could barely understand him in his Scottish accent, but it was, he basically said, look, I'm not ignoring you, Russ, but I don't like doing Zoom calls. Can we do it when we go back to London Stadium? I'm like, yeah, of course we can. And then we proceeded to talk about West Ham, the current team and stuff, for about an hour on the phone. And he didn't have to do that. He could have just sent me a text or whatever, but he did that. And then he signed it off in, such a Scottish way. He went, oh, Russ, I've really got to go now because the tea bags have just dried on the washing line. I've got to bring them in. Like, brilliant. But and he's such a lovely guy as well. But yeah, put Tonka in. Let's go centre halves then, Brian. Who's your first centre half?
Right. Well, they kind of go as a bit of a pair, really.
Yeah, no problems.
So how about this for a no chance list? There'll be some grown men probably sobbing when they get to the end of this. I've got Bill Green, for those of you with long memories, Mick McGivern, who was a bit shaky, Paul Hilton, Gary Strodder, and Gary Breen. My goodness, Gary Breen. There was a player. And of course, Matthew Upson. Now, Matthew Upson was not the worst player ever, but he just was not interested in West Ham, was he? And in that season, 2010 and 11, when we went down, he just went missing. And it was amazing how many reports you read about West Ham describe Scott Parker as club captain. And to all intents and purposes, he was, but technically he wasn't. And Upson, I don't know, never been a.
No, I think when I finally write my memoirs, I've got a good Matt Upson story. I can't tell, but when I write my memoirs, I will be saying that story about Matt Upson.
Drop me an email. I'd be interested to read.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I know what you mean. He just went missing, didn't he, towards that season completely.
But of course, we've had lots of very decent centre halves. Tommy Taylor, Kevin Locke. I mean, of course, he was the guy who was going to follow Bobby Moore. Not much of
no pressure.
Not much to follow there, eh? And Tom Ferdinand. Of course, Rio can't be included because he was never in the side that got relegated. So he was good, and he was too good to go down. Ian Pearce, Colin Foster, Winston Reid, Danny Gabidon, and of course James Tompkins, who was also a bit of a favourite of mine, who came up through the academy. However, my in with a shout are this is who I picked from. Bonzo again, of course, Steve Potts, Christian Daly, who didn't love Christian Daly, exactly. Alvin Martin, and Tony Gale. And in the end, as I say, I think you've got to pick the pair of them together for
Yeah.
if 86, if no other reason.
Yeah.
And it's Alvin Martin and Tony Gale.
Yeah, Stretch and Reg, as I know they're called now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's I did, because that's the thing, when I started interviewing these players, I didn't know any of their nicknames. It's not like in a journal or anything. It's not like on Wikipedia. So when Tony goes, "Yeah, I'm going to put Stretch in," I was like, "Okay." Yeah,
right.
No, you're right, and it's incredible going through those players. They got relegated, and it's like, this is brilliant. I'm loving this, bro. It's absolutely fantastic. Right, okay,
well, there are some genuine, obviously there are no World Cup winners in this because none of those were in relegated sides.
No.
But the actual real legends, you've got Bonds, Brooking, Parks, Devonshire, Martin, Potts, Dix, Ray Stewart, Paolo Di Canio, Frank McAvenny, Frank Lampard, Mark Noble. There's some decent players to choose from. And that's before you get down to the Liam Brady's, Carricks, Winterburns, Scott Parkers, Bob Robsons, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of players who have been very, very good for us and still found themselves at the wrong end of the table at the end of the season.
Right, okay, brilliant. Let's go into midfield then, Brian. Let's go left midfield, left wing.
Well, left midfield for me is Alan Devonshire.
Yeah.
Just again, brilliant player to watch. Absolutely class player. Watching him dribble the ball, I don't think I've seen many better, if any.
Yeah.
Obviously got him from non-league football, one of the great bargains as well that West Ham had. Utterly loyal to the club, and if Alan Devonshire doesn't make anybody's West Ham side, they need to go away and have a word with themselves, is all I can say.
You're right. I mean, people of people who are obviously fortunate enough to see him play, he's always in there, to be honest. But obviously, that's what's quite nice, this generational thing, because otherwise you'll get, if you had like a dream 11, everyone would pick almost identically the same 11 players.
Absolutely.
It'd be quite boring after 10, let alone almost 100 interviews we've had so far.
Of course.
And so but you're right, and Devon, and what's been quite nice, sort of a learning process for me, is I wasn't around to see the boys of 86. I started really going about 92 when I was old enough. So going back and listening, finding out all these and YouTubing and Wikipediaing all these players, like John Charles and people like that, who I had no recollection. I didn't know of them. It's really like learning a lot more of this history of West Ham, which I don't think I had an appreciation of. And people like Dev, everyone talks of it so highly. All the players I interviewed talk about him so highly. So again, going back and seeing him, and obviously the two different Devs, the sort of pre-injury and post-injury, and having a player to reinvent, that would never happen now. Like I always look at someone like Michael Owen, who relied heavily on his pace. He got injured, and from then on, he wasn't the same player because he couldn't. Now, Dev was this flying winger by all accounts until the injury. Then he had to change and become this incredibly skillful player. That doesn't happen anymore now. Once they get an injury, they're done, aren't they? Really. They're too soft nowadays.
Well, while we're on the subject of Alan Devonshire, there he is on the front copy of a West Ham programme.
Yeah.
And this again is from another relegation season. And the reason that I'm so fond of this programme is that it's one of the finest bits of football analysis I've ever heard while sitting in the stands. We were playing Tottenham that day. It was the week before Christmas. It was a relegation season. We were shocking, and we kind of all knew that we were going down.
Yeah.
Now, sitting in front of me and my wife were a couple of old boys who were complaining quite loudly as to just how bad West Ham are. You know what it's like, football people sitting in front of you. You can't help but sometimes listening to their conversation. So, and I'll sort of keep the language rather less industrial than it was at the time. But one bloke turned to his mate and basically said that West Ham were either has-beens or, well, let's say merchant bankers, shall we?
Yes,
and he then went through the side and listed them one by one. And I can remember it to this day. I can still basically hear him say it. McKnight, banker.
Yeah.
Potts, has-been. Paris, banker. Gale, has-been. Martin, has-been. Devonshire, has-been. Brady, has-been. Kelly, banker. Rossignol, banker. Dickens, banker. And the only one in the side who he didn't thus describe was Paul Ince, who used to play for us back then, who you may have heard of, who I suspect doesn't make many people's favourite tips for a number of reasons. But anyway, so poor old Devo at that stage was suffering badly with injury, as were a number of them, which is why we got relegated that season. But
who needs the Sun ratings where you can just have the banker or has been rating? I think that's perfect now.
Well, my wife and I still basically, that is our our measure of
looking down the team
to one category or the other.
Love it.
Certainly the present lot do.
Less said about that, the better. Right, okay. Let's go right midfield. Let's go the other side. Who we got on the other side?
Could I come back to that, because that's a bit of a surprise pick?
Yeah, go for it. You talk about who you want to talk about next.
Let's do the middle pair again. They go together, which is Brooking and Bonds. What is there, to say more about Trevor Brooking or Billy Bonds? Billy Bonds is my all-time favourite West Ham player, and in one of the books I wrote about West Ham, I actually wrote a chapter as an open letter to Billy Bonds, and I hope he gets to read it one day anyway, because he was fantastic. He really just epitomised everything, personified everything that West Ham is all about, and Trevor Brooking likewise. What a fantastic pair of ambassadors for the club they've been. Anybody I'm sure who is of similar vintage will have both of those in their side. Of course, with Bonzo, of course, he went on for so long that
he could cross
generations. A lot of generations will have seen him.
And Brooking as well. Look at the players he played with, across his career at West Ham, and he could have. Obviously, when we went down, and he stayed with the club and was still playing for England, and
yes, well, that's kind of true of a number of these. It's the loyalty that they've shown to the club, and obviously there are a lot of good midfielders who haven't made my 11. And Paolo Di Canio, for example, I'm sure a lot of people will be going, "My God, why isn't Di Canio in there?" You've got all sorts of great players who. Michael Carrick was a terrific player, Joe Cole, but that is that loyalty thing. I think that counts a lot with me, as obviously it does with so many West Ham fans, which is partly the reason for my right-sided midfielder, who is kind of possibly the archetypal loyal club player, and that's Patsy Holland. Who obviously he's not the greatest player technically West Ham have ever had. Well, I don't think anybody's ever tried harder than Patsy. What was it, 350 games, I think he played for us. He was not the most confident character either. He suffered apparently with, kind of with nerves and self-doubt, and to turn out and play, first division football, and of course was with us in the second division as well. Must take quite something there. Most footballers come over as quite sort of cocky, don't they, and full of themselves. And I think Patsy struggled a bit sometimes with his self-confidence. But he gave 100%, to an absolutely terrific player. And it's a kind of interesting little couple of stories with Patsy Holland as well, that his first goal for West Ham was actually Jimmy Greaves' home debut. Everybody remembers, again, of my generation, Greaves' debut itself at Main Road, and the 2 goals and the mud and the boys' goal. But his first home appearance was against Liverpool, and Patsy Holland was picked for that. And apparently he turned his ankle having a kickabout with his mates a couple of days beforehand, and thought he was going to get dropped, and he probably would have done if he told the boss, but he didn't. He hobbled on. He got fixed up and played, and actually scored the winner in that game, in a 1-0 game against Liverpool, which was a cracking game. And of course he then stuck with us in the relegation years. And his final game was the game, I think, against Notts County, who went the year we came second and they won, but he got a vital goal at their place that basically ensured we went up. So he's very much part of the fabric of the West Ham story, both up and down. So Patsy Holland for me on the right side. And again, if there are any YouTubers out there, have a look at a goal he scored against Hereford in the FA Cup, which is a belter.
All right, I'm going to make a note of that. And I believe he says when he checks I always have my spreadsheet open. I haven't had my spreadsheet open today. I must apologise. I believe that might be the first time Patsy Holland's come up, I think, in conversation. Let's have a look. He says when he quick waits for his Excel to open. Patsy Holland. No, sorry, second time he's come up. I think, but still, yeah, you're right. And then that's a great reason why we do this channel. So players like Patsy Holland, and there's a few others who have come up, like who I've never heard of. Particularly when I invited, who did I interview? I think it was Jim Baker. And it was like he had Ernie Gregory and people like that who I'd never heard of. And so, it's brilliant to find all these extra players, and they get in their time to shine again. Do you know what I mean? In sort of the modern era when there's so many football players. Okay, we'll put Patsy Holland in. That's great.
I know you had Jeff Pike on a while back.
Yeah, Pikey on, yeah.
He's very much out of, that same ilk, a fantastic club servant, gave 100+% every time. A fantastic player, and in many ways, Patsy's in there as a tribute to all of them. He's the unsung hero player.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know what you mean.
Every side needs, I think.
Yeah, totally. We had who did I interview? It hasn't come up yet. It'll be out before your one comes out. I think it's Bobby Barnes, and he put Pikey in. For that exact reason, he's sort of an unsung hero, and I totally agree. And there's lots of them, unfortunately. Like in the modern day era, for me, people like Hayden Mullins. He did a lot of hard work, but he's not apples and pears you compare them to. But in the modern era and stuff, and people like Tim Breaker, I never really appreciated when I was a young lad. Watching back again, didn't realize how good he was, and actually when I interviewed him, I apologised for not rating him when I was 10. It was like, I think I can get over that, Russ. But no, that's really useful. Okay, we'll put Patsy Holland in. Let's go up front.
I certainly agree with you with Hayden Mullins, and it's my lifelong belief that if he'd been playing in a cup final against Liverpool, we'd have won that game.
Yeah. But, I remember that. That game. They both got sent off, didn't they? Him and Javier Garcia. They both got done, and all Liverpool. We were like, because I think it was harsher on us because Mullins was so integral.
Absolutely, it was. Absolutely, yeah. No, I think every team needs a Hayden Mullins.
Could do with a couple now, to be honest. But yeah, all right, we'll put Patsy in. Let's go up front, and then Brian, who have you got up front?
Okay, well, I've gone for a big and a little one, and my little one is he wasn't a little actually. Was Pop Robson?
Yeah,
who was terrific, and it was such a shame that Robson and Hurst did not have a longer period up front together than they did. They would have been unstoppable. Pop came basically the season before they had 1.5 seasons together. And then Jeff Hurst went at the end of 72, and Robson stayed, of course, scored goals for fun, including some terrific goals as well. He just had that ability to score from anywhere. And in his early days, there were a couple of goals he scored against Man U at Upton Park. Now, you're always going to love a West Ham striker who scores goals against.
It's always Man United. Yeah,
it never fails to please, does it? But Pop was really special, and again, he's one of those players I think that never got the credit really outside of those clubs he played for that he really deserved. And obviously, he was 3 times I think with Sunderland, twice with us, and I think those who sort of saw him and saw him play week in week out really did rate him. He was extra special.
No, I agree, and I think. I can't remember what. I think it was one of the ex-players put that Pop Robson was basically his idol, and again, I was like, what? And, because again, it's a player I didn't really know. Then go back and see some of the goals he scored. Yeah, he was a hell of a player. That was sure. Right, okay, we'll put Pop in, and who's he going to partner him? Who's the last piece?
This there's a bit of a link actually with Pop in that Pop Robson scored a hat-trick against Millwall. In one of our seasons down there, and I didn't know this until I looked it up, but my other striker was playing in the same game with him, which is David Cross. And again, probably not everybody's first choice, but he really put himself around for West Ham, and in many ways his finest moment, of course, was the 1980 Cup final when he
Yes.
played up front. This would be the
Indeed, in the shirt.
1980 Cup final against
Yep.
Arsenal, of course. And he was asked to play lone striker. He was brilliant that day, as were the rest of the side. And he again scored regularly. He was there. He was at the club in a relegation. He came in the what was it? We went down in 77. Yeah, that's right. He came in 77 and was there. We got relegated that season. He was there for the 3 years that we were down in the second division.
Yeah.
Of course, leading goal scorer in the division in the year we won the cup, and again scored quite regularly when we were back in the first division. He, sorry, I think I may have just my camera there slightly with the excitement of the badge, but David Cross was our own true psycho. Of course, was he deserves his place up front, I think, and him and Pop Robson. With the rest behind them, I reckon they're too good to go down.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was David Cross that said Pop Robson, because it was like his dream to play with him when they played together. So it's when I couldn't think who it was. Then he said David Cross. I said I'm 99% sure he said Pop Robson was his hit with his idol. But too good to go down. When you look at that, it's incredible, isn't it? They all got relegated in some time in their West Ham career. But as you said, too good to go down. Brian, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much. All the effort you've got into it is brilliant. Thank you. And everyone will appreciate that, because everyone loves a theme on this channel, that's for sure. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
And obviously, thank you to everyone for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Keep the messages coming in. I read everyone. I'm very humbled by all the support for the channel. And until next time, everybody, from me and Brian, take care, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you again very, very soon. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.